Better get yourself into a hazmat suit, Agent. We just got word that the experimental antivirals lost in the Dark Zone have been located. There's no time to wait. You and a team need to go secure them right now, or someone else will. Just get there before the storm really hits. And listen, do whatever you need to do to get back alive. You're needed. Plow out.
The Division is about survival, but to phrase it in this manner in many ways lessens the effect of what this game truly delivered. You see, once you strip away all the ARPG looter-shooter elements, The Division was about mankind in its most primal form, posing the question, when all hope is lost, what were you willing to do to live another day? So in its truest, most raw, and purest form, The Division wasn't just about survival, it was survival. 2016 was an incredible year for Massive Entertainment's auspicious leap into the AAA sphere, delivering one of the most immersive games of all time, Tom Clancy's The Division. It was gritty, it was unique, serving up modes and methods gamers had not yet seen. Areas like the Dark Zone and Underground were truly interesting, along with one of the pioneers in the extraction shooter genre, survival. If you're new here and want to help support the channel, please consider hitting subscribe and ringing the notifications bell. And now, let's dive into one of the greatest game modes you've probably never played. According to multiple sources, 2016's The Division is in the Ubisoft top 10 charts for most copies sold, mixing it up with the likes of heavy hitters like Far Cry, Rainbow Six Siege, and of course Assassin's Creed, with other reports stating that it broke multiple Ubisoft sales records in its first 24 hours, besting every other title in the company's history. Now, as we attempt to steer clear of creating an entirely different video topic, one where we discuss what made this game a hit, such as New York City, the snow, the immersion, that masterful mix of real people and their stories kind of mixed up with fantasy, wrapped up in a post-apocalyptic wrapper, the fact that the game had a massive PvEVP zone called the Dark Zone, which was definitely ahead of its time. It made use of procedural generation tech to create ominous and unique pathways through the underground, and it even brought all-out warfare as agent squared off against agent in large sections of NYC and the Last Stand DLC. But for many, the true gem of that series of DLC releases for The Division was survival. In many ways, survival was at the tip of the sword for the extraction shooter genre. Was it Escape from Tarkov? Was it The Division Survival? You know, there's always been a discussion there, but what can be said is that Massive had delivered an incredibly immersive and unique extraction experience within the Division universe, and it saw huge player counts, especially at launch. But what made this mode so damn cool besides being one of the first? Well, that's the question I want to take a look at. Now, not everyone knows that The Division was not originally set to be what you see it as today. And you can see that initial vision from the game at the end of the famous E3 gameplay reveal that released in 2013. You see, back then, The Division was going to feature a dynamic landscape with multiple dark zones where PvEVP was the norm, not the exception. Now, we'll never know what an entire The Division game would have looked like in that setting, but with the survival game mode, that look was available to preview in small slices. Now, what you personally prefer, either a PvE game with small and limited PvP experiences, or a full-on PvEVP extraction looter shooter, that's an excellent question for chat. And definitely make sure to drop a comment if you are either Team PvE or Team PvEVP down below in the comments. But what was made abundantly clear is that for those that were willing to tackle the survival game mode, it was simply exceptional. And contributing heavily to that feeling was the weather. Now, The Division has always had a varied mix of weather, and day and night cycles to boot, ranging from sunny and clear to blizzard conditions with limited visibility. But with survival, everything was then multiplied by a factor of 10. Each and every time you dove in, you were thrust into the very teeth of an incredibly intense blizzard. Tension is the name of the game when it comes down to the survival game mode, and by severely limiting your ability to see, even though you may be out in an open street of New York City, you tend to feel closed off and confined, and that creates tension. Danger could be mere feet away, and you wouldn't know it until it meets you head on. This is where sound comes into play. The never-ending rush of the gale force winds, the distant screams and explosions along with that sporadic gunfire. You can often hear enemy targets talking before you can see them. Every sound cue is a clue to waiting danger. Explosive traps, footsteps, enemies, and other players alike, all of it is fed to the player through the incredible throughput of sound. It's almost jarring how quickly the sound is deconstructed once you enter a building, as your ears have to quickly adjust to not being so tuned up and hypersensitive while trying to filter through the sound of that ever-rushing wind. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the soundtrack, created specifically for the survival game mode, with its slurring synthesizers and driving combat tracks. But where survival was so interesting, dare I say intoxicating, was how raw and simplistic it was in design, which I believe was part of its genius. You see, The Division was, at its very core, an ARPG with elements of also being a looter-shooter, but survival stripped that all away. It effectively got rid of all the gear game stat-driven bullshit, and it broke it down to simple building blocks. Your character has a sepsis infection due to injuries while crash landing in Manhattan. You're flung into a superstorm while equipped with only a pistol and wearing a very thin hazmat suit. Your mission? To make it to the heart of the Dark Zone, to retrieve a lost case of antivirals while looting materials and gear along the way. Clothing, better armor and weapons could be looted or crafted, and all the while, a player had to manage multiple economies and effects such as hunger, cold, thirst, health, and of course, the sepsis infection, along with everything trying to kill you, which included other players. When survival dropped in 2016, the gaming world hadn't really seen a full implementation of this style of game mode. Was it an extraction royale? Was it an extraction shooter? That still remains a topic for debate, but what is clear is that survival was there when this genre was kind of kicking off. In some respects, Massive had taken elements from other very small, specific, singular survival games and melded them together into this ultra gritty man versus weather versus his own mortality, swirled together with the uncertainty of multiplayer. And not only did it work, it excelled. Now, with 2026 fast approaching and near 10 years removed from the survival game mode's launch, it looks and feels more commonplace. Battle royales and extraction shooters have become the norm, but back in 2016, survival stood out there alone, and goddamn was it awesome. As we attempt to kind of step back and take it all in, this game mode absolutely delivered on one core philosophy: immersion. You see, survival takes place on the very same streets and alleyways of New York City players had already seen and run through 100 times during the game's campaign. But here, within survival, they look and felt entirely different. The element of danger was thick in the air, and between the driving snowstorm and faint glow of street lights, interior lights, and burn barrels, it becomes as much about darkness as it does about light. Also, when compared to many modern extraction shooters, survival did quite the opposite. It prioritized environment and truly making a player feel like they were alone, or at least they were until they ran into up to 23 other players all placed on the same map, all looking for resources and all out to remove you from the game's equation. Even the way the game pushed players to the center of the map, creating even more conflict, was different than the way most other games did it. You see, there were no contracting radiation rings forcing players together, as it was done with immersion in mind. using the sepsis infection and a player's gradual increased immunity to the medication effects as a way of pushing you towards the center. For players pushing their runs into the 2-hour mark, popping stims or meds would prolong your life for mere seconds, prompting you to that one final encounter, the ultimate test of your abilities, extraction. For the players strong and savvy enough to make it this far, Survival had one lethal surprise up its sleeve: the Hunters. The Division's apex predators, on par or even stronger than that of geared up Division agents, the Hunters were the gatekeepers for making it home safely. No one will ever forget making it to their first extraction, firing off the flare, and seeing their HUD go haywire as the Hunters appeared in a puff of static and smoke. Many a run has been thwarted by these killers, and I distinctly remember one of these things jumping down the center of a several-story staircase, hitting me and my squad mate with a stun grenade while pulling out its axe and unceremoniously ending all of our hard work. And so began the Division players' love affair with the Hunters. Calls went out far and wide for more of them in every part of the game. They then appeared in the Underground. They next appeared in Resistance, making a return in both Stalker and full-blown Hunter form in the Division 2. For the truly sadistic, events were even staged and organized to fully populate a server with 24 players who would all arrive at extraction simultaneously, bringing about a 24 Hunter spawn that was capable of nearly cooking the server.
Ballistic shields up! Ballistic shields up!
Now, as intense and intoxicating as this mode could be, it was definitely not for everyone. Even with a PvE-only mode, survival was limited by several factors, the first of which was static cache locations. Now, since this mode was created and delivered back in 2016, at that time, it had to be capable of functioning on 8th generation consoles like PS4 and Xbox One. And we've since heard from the developers that the mode required that the base game be heavily modified, with much of the game's lighting and effects being stripped out just to make the mode work. Now, one of those items that simply couldn't be supported could have been random loot cache spawns. Another common complaint from the players was a lack of loot, and while, yes, survival wasn't the most generous with its rewards, it gradually became better, including classified gear pieces and exotics as rare loot drops post-mission. Also with survival, you went in with nothing, and if you died, you lost nothing, so it was definitely the anti-extraction shooter formula. But with survival, for many, the ride was never about the loot. It wasn't about the XP, it was all about the journey of seeing New York City at its most lethal, pushing players and the game itself to the very limits of its capabilities, as it stripped away all of the min-maxing and theory crafting of the base game and forced players to make split decisions to engage or avoid based on what they currently had equipped, along with a healthy dose of player intuition. Looking at the current chapter in the Division franchise, that being the Division 2, much of what was introduced back in the 2016 version has continued on. The Dark Zone made a return, albeit unfortunately as 3 smaller zones, but it's there. Resistance morphed into the Descent or Summit, depends on how you look at it. Even 2016's Incursions were expanded into raids in the Division 2, but the one mode that never made a return, reimagined or expanded upon, was survival. For many, this is the single biggest fumble in the franchise's history. To have the keys to a mode that started a genre and a movement, and to not expand and innovate on that formula is still a very intriguing topic. The Division 2 has once again dropped a teaser ahead of 2025's Gamescom conference, leading players to speculate and dream of survival making a return. Maybe it would be in Washington, D.C., the setting of the Division 2, or maybe it could be a reimagined version of the original vision for the mode, now modernized using the updated technical horsepower of the newer game. We will see soon enough, but what I can say is that getting in a round of survival earlier today, the mode still looks and plays with just as much intensity as I remember, cementing itself as one of the pioneers of early extraction shooters, and it will forever be remembered as one of the greatest and most immersive game modes ever created, you've probably never played. But here's where you get to sound off. Share your best survival memories in the comment section below, and I also want to pose a question to you. Do you think Massive Entertainment is about to reveal some form of survival in The Division 2, or will that have to wait until The Division 3? For your information, survival is still around on the original 2016 Division game, and you can often find mostly full servers, especially when global events and their modifiers are active. If you happen to like this video, please consider hitting subscribe and don't forget to ring the notifications bell. A heartfelt thank you goes out to all of our channel members, for without your support, content like this would not be possible. And until the next one, this is LtBuzzLitebeer, signing off.